Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 1636. The topic is training and the title is using potentiation sets for a better stimulus. So a listener wrote in and they said, I use your live monthly programming service, thank you very much, and have loved the workouts so far. That's awesome to hear. They said, I love the variety of the exercises and how I feel through the workouts. It's new to me to feel completely exhausted by the end of the workout, but to not feel in pain between the workouts. Yay. Thank you for your programming. I recently was watching a YouTube video and heard a trainer mention potentiation sets. Given your knowledge, I assume you know what those are, so I won't insult you by trying to explain them. Always explain everything. I always have more to learn. I wanted to ask if you thought they would be a good addition to your programming. If so, how can I add them without negatively impacting the programming? If not, would you mind explaining why not? Again, thank you for all of your knowledge and for the programming service. You have a listener and supporter for life. Yes. Cool. Well, I'm glad you're really enjoying the programming. Thank you very much for signing up for that. And I do know what potentiation sets are, thankfully. But always, as I said, everybody, if you ever send me anything, I don't ever mind if you explain anything or put in links or whatever. It's always good for me to, renew my knowledge or to learn new things. You never know. So when I work with trainers, like over half my clients are trainers, I will often tell them hey, I'm going to start kind of at the basics. And it's not necessarily that I want to, I'm insulting them, but I don't want to also miss out on something. If I assume they know things, then I never mention those things. What if they don't? What if we've misconnected on some things and all of a sudden that's something that's holding us back later on? So I myself don't feel insulted when somebody tries to teach me something, so that's great. Just a good chance for me to see if I do know it or not. So don't ever hesitate if you ever want to reach out. You're welcome to send me anything and include links or whatever. So what potentiation sets is essentially, it's kind of like the last warm-up set. Before you do your first working set, the idea is you do a set that has full intentionality and it's really close to, or it's at your actual working set weight, but you do it sub-maximal volume. So the idea of this, I've actually heard it explained this way, and I like it, is somebody said, especially if you're doing multiple repetitions, especially if you're doing bodybuilding type stuff, a lot of mind-muscle connection things, sometimes people will say they feel better in a movement in the second, third, or fourth set. So they get the first set in, then the second set they kind of feel their groove. Then they're by the third or fourth set, I actually feel like I really know what I'm doing. And that's when I feel like it's most effective. So the idea of a potentiation set is to get better results from the first set. So that way you kind of already feel in the groove, you feel ready to go, and you're going to get a better response out of the first working set rather than waiting until the second or third working set to actually feel good with it. So what you do is on the last warm-up set, you would use your working set weight, or say 90%, really close to it. But you just do 1, 2, 3, usually it's half the volume or so of the working set reps, and I'll get that in a second. But you do it with full intentionality, really paying attention to what you're doing, and you're feeling the movement. So that way, then when you take your full rest and you go to the first working set, you're ready to go. This is something that has been used because people often just kind of blow through their warm-ups and they don't really pay attention to the quality of what they're doing. So all it is more so just a way to say, hey, before you get through this last warm-up and then have to start paying attention, why don't you pay attention now? That would be a good idea. So we should be paying attention to all of our warm-ups, and all of our warm-up sets should be considered potentiation sets. There really doesn't need to be a signification or a differential between the last warm-up set. We should just always be doing this. So potentiation sets, that's actually already included in programming when I write it for clients. On the first page of the programming for my one-on-one clients and in the live monthly programming, you'll see this in the beginning pages, is there's a section that says per exercise warm-ups. And it explains how to pick the right amount of weight for the warm-ups and how to manage the intentionality and focus of the warm-ups. So it's already explained. But we can be more intentional about our warm-ups and think of them as like a special thing, like a potentiation set, to try to get better stimulus from them, which then will lead to better stimulus in our working sets. So we can definitely start to think of them, as more significant than what we maybe previously thought they were, but they are significant, so we should already be doing that. But it's good to kind of reignite our awareness that warm-up sets are meant to be full intentionality and fully attentive. So the last warm-up set, for example, if you want to treat it like the typical way people would set up potentiation sets. On your last warm-up set, use 90 to 100% of the working weight, but perform only 50% of the working set repetitions. And usually it's kept under 5 reps. So some examples. Let's say for leg extension, your working set weight is going to be 200 pounds and you expect to do 8 to 12 repetitions. So the last warm-up set, you can use maybe 180 to 200 pounds. That's at 90 to 100%. But only do 4 repetitions. So you're going to use the working set weight or very close to it. But you're going to do sub-maximal volume. So for those 4 reps, you're going to pay full attention. You're going to think of crisp contractions, good, slow, controlled motion, but then you're going to stop. So you're not going to fail. You're just going to do half the volume. You're going to take a full normal rest, and then when you go into your first working set, you kind of feel more prepared. That's the idea. Let's say you're doing dumbbell chest presses, and your working set, you're expecting to do 80 pounds. You're probably going to get around 10 reps. So the potentiation set, you can use maybe 70 to 80 pounds. So this would be the last warm-up. 70 to 80 pounds, and maybe only do 4 reps. 4 or 5 reps. Slow, controlled, think of squeezing the muscles, thinking about being efficient in the movement. And then you take your full rest, and then you go into your working set. Let's say you're doing barbell squats. Maybe your working set, you're expecting to do 275 pounds, and you want to do 4 sets of 5 reps. Well, maybe your last warm-up, you do maybe 250 or 275, somewhere in there, and you maybe do just 2 repetitions. So you got under the weight, you got set, you got your mind right, you walked it out, you do 2 super crisp, super clean reps, you rack it, and you're like, okay, I know what that's going to feel like, I know the focus I should give it, I'm going to give a full rest, and then I'm going to go ahead and go into my first working set. So that's the idea. Of a potentiation set, what it really is you're giving your last warm-up set full intentionality, and you're going to really prime your thought process so that way you're ready for the first working set. One of the differences here for people is sometimes they don't typically do their last warm-up set that heavy. So they might be only 70 or 80% before of the working set weight. So if you do normally only do 70 to 80% for your last warm-up set, this could be something that's kind of new and unique for you, is to actually warm up all the way to 90 to 100%, but do half the repetitions. So that could be a fun thing to do. If you're in my programming, you don't need to do any changing. So you just, approach your warm-up sets like this. So maybe you throw in that last warm-up set. Maybe you typically would go to 70, 80%, and then you go right to your working set. So just add that potentiation set before your first working set. You won't need to adjust anything. Since they're sub-maximal, since they're not taken to failure, they really don't have any impact on total recovery volume. So therefore, you don't need to adjust your volume of your program or the intensity of your program, because it's not really going to tap into any resources. So if you manage it correctly, it's not really going to mess you up at all. So therefore, you don't have to change anything about the workouts. If anything, it's just going to help you actually get better results from your workouts by having a better mind-muscle connection, that better kind of technique connection for better efficiency. Okay? So definitely understand potentiation sets. I think they're really cool. If you haven't been approaching your warm-up sets in that way, it would be a really fun way to give some more purposefulness to your warm-ups. It can help kind of like wake up your nervous system, help produce more adrenaline and endorphins, but we should already be doing that in our warm-ups if we're doing warm-ups correctly. It primes your mindset to be fully intentional and like zoned in and focused on your working sets, and it primes that kind of mind-muscle connection or your technique efficiency. So potentiation sets can definitely increase performance and effectiveness of your working sets. So something that like you may have heard before is potentiation sets. They're really also just like the same thing as what a priming set is. So I've talked about in past podcasts about pre-exhaust and priming sets. So priming exercises or priming concepts. So we had it in podcast 1199. It was a Q&A podcast titled Programming Adjustments to Improve Technique, and we talked about priming exercises. And then way back when in podcast 334, it was a training podcast titled Priming versus Pre-Exhaust. And that talks about the difference between those things and how to properly use priming as well. So potentiation sets are kick-ass, super fun, definitely going to help. You can throw those into the programming without any modifications really at all. It's just going to help you feel more tuned in and ready to go for your working sets. So love it, love it, love it. I love when people like watch extra videos, read extra information, share everything. I'm happy to make podcasts, happy to talk about it. So like for our live monthly programming service, we have a group live document that people can ask questions. I'll answer them one-on-one, and then everybody in the group can learn from them. If you have any questions you don't want to share in the live document, you can always send me a personal email, and I answer questions that way as well. But the idea of the live monthly programming is you get programming that's brand new every 4 weeks based on the topic you want or the focus you want, but then you also get the ability to ask one-on-one questions anytime. So really awesome service, tons of education, and great programming. So I'm super happy the listeners happy with that service. Awesome feedback. Love it, love it, love it. If anybody needs anything, just always shoot me an email like this person did. I'm always happy to make a podcast to help. Okay. Well, if you have any questions, email me, brutalirongym@gmail.com. And then if you like our podcast, please share it. The more people we share the podcast with, the more people we can help through the podcast, which is the whole idea of why we're doing it. So thank you for those who share it. So that way we can kind of spread the word and help more people. And then thank you to those who donate to support the podcast. You can do that on our website. And even just $5 a month, anything you can give, one-time donation, anything, it goes towards the hosting costs every year. And it goes towards just the time committed to make the podcast, which I really appreciate the financial aspects. It helps kind of have this make somewhat more sense business-wise. So thank you very much. And then if you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more on our social media channels. So you can find us and follow us under the name Brutal Iron Gym on Instagram and YouTube. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.